engine. If we don't stop the car, we can destroy the engine. In our relationships, when we get angry, the red light is going on. There's either too much I, too much control, or too much we, too much dependency. Now, I'm much like Mark Twain. The older I've become, the wiser my father was. When I was a little boy, my dad had a lot of wonderful sayings, and as I grew up and listened to them, he had a lot of wonderful sayings. At that time, I thought they were pretty silly. But the older I've become, the more wise his sayings are. And one of his favorite was, you have to make lemonade out of lemons. Now, I've learned from that. I hate to hit my head against the wall. I try to learn from things pretty quickly, but there's one area in my life that I kept doing the same thing thousands of times, well into my 40s, even into my 50s, even though I failed every single time. I never once succeeded. I kept doing it well into my 50s. You know what that was? Thinking that I could fix you or I could change you. Today, I absolutely believe that I cannot change or fix anyone. I'm sure many of you have in your homes the Serenity Prayer. It's the second most popular prayer after the Our Father. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You know what that means simply? I can't change or fix you, and you can't change or fix me. The only person I can really change or fix is myself. And that's true wisdom. Although, I'm really open. If any of you have ever been able to fix or change someone, get in touch with me and prove it to me, because I'd love to start doing that again. I'd love to have that power. But nobody's ever done it. Never come to me and gave me an example. You know what that means? That anger isn't about me blaming. See, I can blame somebody for several reasons. I can blame them because I want them to change. Well, I can't change anybody. Or when I'm blaming them, I'm attacking their behavior. And as we talked about already, we always make a bad situation worse whenever we attack somebody. I can be 100% wrong, but when you attack me, I will always become defensive. So anger can't be about me blaming. You know what it's about me? It's about me changing. That's the meaning of the Serenity Prayer. Whenever I get angry, it's a call for me to change. Now, during our journey together, this spiritual journey, I hope you got a chance to meet Don Fisher. He talked at one of our sessions. I met Don many years ago. He was a young paramedic in the fire department. He loved to play, he loved to have a good time. He loved to golf and to ski and to surf. I was Mr. Responsibility. Well, when we started working together, we get in these big fights. I'd yell and scream at him because he wasn't doing anything. And he was yelling and screaming at me because I was controlling everything. I don't know if any of you are like me, but there's a right way, there's a wrong way, and there's my way. And whenever I delegate something to somebody, they don't quite do it my way, so it's only proof that the only person who can do it right is me. People think or work for somebody like me, if the old man wants to do everything, I'm going to let him do everything. Well, one day I get this brilliant insight. Why am I doing everything? Because I want to do everything. I want to be in control. There was too much of an I. And I said, anger is about me changing, not about me blaming. Don needed to become more of an I. He needed to participate more, and I needed to become more of a we. After all these years, he's taken over the business. He does all the planning of life's journey, does all the business work. I want to say he doesn't do it as well as I could. He gets it done, though. He had a different father than I did. But it gets done. Over the years, he's become much more responsible, and I've become much more playful. He's planning our next project, and I'm planning my next vacation. Anger was about me changing, not about me blaming. Now, it's amazing how grace works. They say amazing grace. Well, when I was trying to figure all this out, a friend of mine, Ann, she called me. She had a problem with her 6th grade son. They say in a marriage, the happiest time in a marriage is before the kids come and after they leave. Well, she had 5 kids, and they all left the house. And oftentimes, a couple has to get to know each other. They got to get reconnected. It's easy to lose the marriage while you have the kids. Well, she didn't really get reconnected to her husband, and she loved being a mother. Well, at 45, she had one of those oopses, one of those surprise pregnancies. Now, when she brought her little boy, I called him King Robert. When she brought King Robert home from the hospital, she installed him as king of the house. She lived her life through Robert. If Robert struck out, or she struck out. If somebody didn't like Robert, they didn't like her. But she spoiled him. There were no consequences. He could do whatever he wanted. Well, she called me. He was in the 6th grade, and she said, "What am I going to do, Father?" Today he's informed me he's never going to go to church again. Remember, 6th grade. Well, I said, "Why should you be surprised? He's been running the house ever since he's been born." I didn't need to say that, did I? There goes my passive-aggressive anger. There goes one of those zingers again. I said, anger's about you changing, not about you blaming. I said, you've been arguing about a lot of things lately. He's been upset because you're smothering him too much. And you're upset because he does whatever he wants. I said, anger's about you changing, not about you blaming. You need to become more of an I, and he needs to become more of a we. Now, I have a whole different approach for grade school kids going to church and high school kids. But I get very nervous when I see children growing up without any sense of God, any sense of Jesus, any spirituality in their life. Because I wonder what's going to happen to them when they reach the dark parts of their life, when they go through the real struggles of life. You see, I think that if I'm not incorrect, almost 70% of parents who send their kids to Catholic school do not go to church on Sunday. Maybe occasionally, but they don't habitually go to church. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. You know, I think one of the big reasons is we don't have family days on Sunday anymore. I remember when I was growing up, family had a family day. We go to church together, that old idea of the family that prays together, stays together. Then Dad would cook a big breakfast. And of course, my mom spent hours cleaning it, and we'd go and spend the whole day as a family. We'd go to Golden Gate Park and picnic. That's when my dad taught me how to throw the football and the baseball. We'd go visit our grandmother. We'd do something together as a family. It was a family day. And if we're really good kids, well, there was an Italian restaurant in North Beach called Pete's. And we would go to Pete's. You walk in through the kitchen, and they're wonderful antipasta. Great salad, homemade minestrone, homemade pasta, chicken and apple fritters for dessert. A family of 6 for $3. And that'd be our family celebration. But you see, a lot of times today, when it comes to Sunday, the family's going in all different directions. So I think it's really important for grade school kids to go to church with their family. The seeds are being planted within. I think the seeds that'll come to fruition many years later. I think it's really important that a family goes together to church. But I told my sister, I said, anger's about you changing, not about you blaming. I said, from now on, Ann, you got to let him live his own life. Everybody's got to learn how to strike out. Everybody's got to learn that not everybody likes him. But from now on, create consequences. If he doesn't want to go to church with his family on Sunday, that means he doesn't play with his friends that day. That's a consequence. So you're teaching him actions have consequences. When you make a decision, you're also accepting the consequences. But I said, here's the 2 rules, though. Don't say it unless you mean it. Because if you say things and you don't follow through, they quit listening. See, my mom was a wonderful disciplinarian without having heavy hands. We used to go to bed when we were supposed to at night. We were civil around the dinner table. There was no TV in school nights. We behaved ourselves in church. When guests came to visit our parents, we disappeared and entertained ourselves. We were good kids because whenever my mom said something, she meant it. So we never tested her. My dad was just the opposite. We knew if he said something, worked on him hard enough, we could get him to change his mind. So we never listened to what he said. We just tried to change his mind. So I said, the big thing, don't say it unless you mean it. And here's the second thing. Don't take it personally. If he wants to go to church, if he doesn't want to go to church on Sunday, he's not doing it to you. He'd do it to any mother he had. See, when you take it personally, I told her, that's conditional love, and he'll react to that, and he'll never learn the consequences. So the next Sunday came along, and little Robert didn't want to go to church, so he didn't play with his friends that day. Well, ever since then, he's been going to church. And you know, he's turned out wonderfully. Anger was about Ann changing, not about her blaming. She needed to become more of an I, and he needed to become more of a we. Now, I'd like to say this, and I'm going to develop it in future talks, but let me develop it in terms of a male and a female. Usually, a man's greatest challenge is to become more of a we. So he's heavy into control. He's heavy into being an I. A woman's greatest challenge is to become more of an I. Her challenge is that she's too much of a we. She's too dependent. That's usually the challenge in the journey. So anger is about me changing, not about me blaming. So therefore, the greatest challenge for a man is to become more of a we, and the greatest challenge for a woman is to become more of an I. Now let me share with you a 4-step process of how to live the Serenity Prayer, how to make anger positive. I'd just like you to think of an argument that you have regularly in your life, maybe with your spouse or with your children or with your parents, the sibling, the kind of argument that's never resolved. You know, you keep arguing about the same thing. Now, let me share with you a 4-step process of how to make that anger positive. First of all, and this is where I talked about praying before centering prayer, paying attention to God's love within, looking for God's grace to help us. What is the issue? Are you too much of an I or too much of a we? Now, I discovered with Don that I was too much of an I. I need to become more of a we. My sister discovered that she was too much of a we. She needed to become more of an I. That's the first step. You have to inform the person how you're going to change. I had to tell Don, hey, Don, you know, if this thing is going to work, you have to do more and I have to do less. I got to let you do. I can't control everything. It's not a good way to go. We got to work together. I had to inform him of how I was changing. Otherwise, he wouldn't understand what's happening. My Ann had to tell her son, Robert, hey, there's a new sheriff in town. From now on, you're going to live your own life, son, but there are consequences. Anger is about me changing, not about me blaming. You always got to inform the other person how you're going to change. Oftentimes, the man will tell his wife, he says, honey, I know that I've spent a lot of time supporting the family, building the career, but I want to get to be part of the family more. I want to really take my grandchildren to some baseball games and to fishing. I want to spend some special time with our grandchildren. I want to bond with our children. I want to become friends with our children. I want to become more involved with the family. I need to become more of a we. The woman will tell her husband, I know, honey, that I've made you and the children my personal life. But our children are adults now. They don't need a mother. I want to participate in the bigger world out there. I want to become a Eucharistic minister in our parish. I want to get involved in Habitat for Humanity. I've always wanted to learn how to play the piano. I want to get involved in the bigger world out there. I want to become more of an I. So you have to inform the person how you're going to change. The third step. And this goes back to our first talk that we gave on anger when I asked you to identify your negative forms of being angry. I have a friend of mine that's a rager. He knows he's a rager. I know he's a rager. When he starts to rage, I don't say a word because I really, as I told you before, I believe it's genetic. He isn't choosing to be a rager. I look upon it like it's a diabetic attack. I don't take him personally. I don't argue with him. I just wait until he's finished, and we talk about it. Because he has admitted he's a rager. I know he's a rager. I don't take it personally. So we make something positive out of it. Now that's why I say, from everything I've learned and being around people who have a really serious anger problem, I think it's so important that they tell their family, they tell the people that are affected by this anger, that they take responsibility for being a rager. They take responsibility for it. Because it takes a lot of pressure off the other members of the family to know that either dad or sometimes mom, that they're going to deal with it. They're taking responsibility for it. It's a tremendous sense of relief. Now, as I look upon it as a disease, as a powerlessness, just as a diabetic has to take sugar, has to take insulin to deal with their problems, their diabetes, I think a rager has to work on his daily maintenance of dealing with the anger on the inside. If a diabetic doesn't take insulin, he's going to get sick. If a rager doesn't deal with the daily angers, when he explodes, it's going to be a volcano. I've noticed in my working with people who have serious anger problems, the more they deal with the anger letters that I talked about, letting go of the anger from their childhood, all the different tools that we've talked about, that when they erupt, it can either be just a little pop or it can be a volcano. So I think they have the responsibility of really having a program to daily monitor their anger so it doesn't pile up inside. I'm just the opposite. I'll be kidding Don about how money's going down the drain. Isn't it funny? And how much money we're wasting. Ha, ha, ha. And he'll say to me, "You're angry." And I've said, "No, I'm not angry. I've never admitted I'm angry on the first try. I'm passive aggressive. I'm just kidding." But when I go apart, I know my passive aggressive nature is to disguise my anger like it's humor. I can admit that. And I'll come back to him and I'll say, "Yeah, we need to talk about some things." But if I couldn't admit I was passive aggressive, the anger would stay there and we wouldn't do anything with it. It would stay negative. So I think it's really important that we own, and that was our first talk on anger, that we own our negative forms of being angry. So we know if we start doing them, we are making a bad situation worse. That's that whole importance of being honest with ourselves. Knowing ourselves so we can love ourselves. Letting God know us so God can love us. Letting others know us so they can love us. Owning that part. Our anger is part of who we are. Now the fourth step is always beware of the counter moves. Now, often in relationships, it's a battle to be top dog. Now, you're choosing to do the right thing. Anger is about you changing because it's something you want to do. You're not doing it to manipulate your spouse, because people can see through manipulation really easy. So always beware of the counter moves. Don't let it throw you off your direction. You may say to your wife, honey, I really think it's time for me to become a more full human being. I have a lot of love in my heart, and I've got to learn how to let it go. I learn how to communicate it. We have such beautiful grandchildren, and our children are just wonderful. And I'd sure miss a lot of life if I never got to know and love them. So I want you to know I'm going to make it a priority. And the wife can say to him, oh, honey, I've been praying for this for years. I'm so happy. Let me guide you. Let me help you. Let me mother you. Let me be in control. Or the wife will tell her husband, I want to go out and I want to develop my own personal life. I want to become my own best friend. I want to become involved in a much bigger world than just the home. You know, our children are adults now. They don't need a mother. I want to become a person. And husband can say, honey, I'm 100% behind you. Go out and become whatever you want to be, but make sure dinner's on the table every night at 5:30. You can be whatever you want to be as long as you keep taking care of me. So the 4-step process, it's so simple. The first is when I get angry, to bring it to God, to honestly look at what's going on. Am I too much of an I? Is the issue my control? Or am I too much of a we? Am I too dependent? And then it's very simple. If I'm too much of an I need to become more of a we. If I'm too much of a we, I need to become more of an I. Then I have to very simply inform the person how I'm going to change. I got to beware of my negative forms of being angry so I don't make a bad situation worse. And always be conscious of the counter moves. It's 4 very simple steps of how to make our anger positive. How to really live the Serenity Prayer. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring this especially to the relationship of man and woman, husband and wife, man and woman, in a very practical way, because I think it's important to apply this specifically. Now, I'll bet you that when I was a little boy, I tried to be holier more than you did. I'll put my holiness up against yours any day of the week. I used to go to 3 masses on All Souls Day. Did any of you do that? I used to go to 3 masses on Easter Sunday. I bet you didn't do that. You know why? To get a plenary indulgence. See, there were so many ways to sin, I had to keep getting these plenary indulgences because they wiped away all punishment due to sin. Now, I like to create models, ways of understanding. And I remember I was in the 5th grade, and I got a plenary indulgence. And I walked across the street, and I told myself I didn't care if a car hit me right now because I knew I'd go straight to heaven. See, as I believed at those moments is how I should always believe if I'm a believing Christian. So if I want to know what it is to live in the love of God, I just remind myself of how I believed then is how I should always believe. When I went to the Jesuits, they really tried to make me holy. I never knew what it meant to be holy. I was pretty sure it was what I wasn't. Well, today we have a new word. And this word I do understand. Holiness is wholeness. All of us are on a journey to become a whole person. And it comes right from the scriptures. In the 2nd story of creation in the Old Testament, it states that God has created man in God's image, male and female. It doesn't say that God created a man and then God created a woman, but God created each one of us, male and female. What it means to be a whole person is to integrate the male and female within us. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about in our next section of getting together is what a man has to do to become whole and what a woman has to do to become whole. And it has very much to do with this, the I and the we that we've talked about in this talk. And there's 2 things and remembering it. So you might think about it before we get together. As you look at your life now, are you more of an I or more of a we? Is your basic issue in life control? Do you have to be in control? And whenever you're not in control, you're nervous? Or is your basic issue, are you too much of a we? Are you too much dependent? Because this talk that I'll share with you the next time we get together deals with the most serious of issues that all of us have to face. How do we learn to live in our own aloneness and not be lonely? We're never going to meet anybody in our life that's going to fill up the hole inside of us. It's an inside job. And so basically, how a man learns to live in his own aloneness and not be lonely is when he becomes more of a we. When a woman learns to live in her own aloneness is when she becomes more of an I. Because the more whole she is, the less dependent she is. And you see, that's what each one of us is on a journey to wholeness. So I'd like you to really reflect on it, because sometimes, you know, a man may have more feminine energy and a woman have more male energy. So it isn't always that because you're a male that you're going to have more male energy. Sometimes a woman, as I say, can have more male energy, a woman can have more male energy, and a man can have more female energy. And secondly, when we talk about this journey of becoming alone, living to live in our own aloneness, that God's love, God's grace is always there calling us to this wholeness. So I can't wait to talk to you next time and share with you this beautiful journey of learning to live in our own aloneness and not be lonely.
It's Steve the Missionary and Tommy Ty from Repent and Submit, and this week we're showing off our musical abilities.
Our abilities to discuss music, that is, plus an epic example of sibling rivalry comes to a head in Saint versus Saint.
And we will introduce you to the only bishop who has ever created a galaxy.
I think I'm gonna need to start fact-checking you, Steve.
Created a galaxy. All that and more on the next episode of Repent and Submit right here on Catholic TV.
This week on We've Got to Talk. It looks kind of stormy. I know. The truth is that it's better to have a heart that's filled with love than all the power in the world. Watch We've Got to Talk right here on Catholic TV.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the May edition of Encounter. We are celebrating 5 years this month. Our first show took place in May of 2014, and we're going strong here in 2015.